I tried to walk 100 kilometers in 24 hours, and it nearly killed me. I'm not just being dramatic, though. I literally almost died. Let's start at the beginning. About a week ago, I was watching a YouTube video of this guy who challenged himself to walk 100,000 steps in one day, which he completed in about 16 and a half hours, and he traveled 86 and a half kilometers in total. So I'm like, it wouldn't have been that much more to do 100 kilometers, so it should be possible to do 100 kilometers in 24 hours. Of course, he has a fitness channel and he's working out all the time, every single day, and I haven't worked out in a year, but I'm like, details. And the funny thing is, like, once that idea for that challenge occurred to me, something happened inside, and it's like, I don't want to do this. This is really dumb, but I feel like I have to do it. It was kind of that, crap, I have to do this, don't I? Like, I don't want to, but part of me does, and I know that I'm going to regret not doing it, so I'm going to have to do it no matter what. Luckily, I was still sick at the time. When I came up with the ideas, I'm like, I can't do it now. I have the perfect excuse. I'm like coughing up. I'm like stuffy. My nose is running. I'm weak. So I'm like, can't do it now. But of course, in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, you'll get better in a couple of days. You can do it then. And that day was yesterday. So the strategy that I used in my head was, all right, let's walk on the beach because my shoes are old. I probably should have bought new shoes before I started traveling 5.5 months ago, and I didn't. And I've done a bunch of stuff. Like I climbed a volcano with them, so they're pretty battered up and definitely not ideal to go walking 100 kilometers. So I'm like, to avoid destroying my feet, I'm gonna go walk on the beach. Ow, something just stung me. Great. Ain't that funny? Because I was an ant. Anyway, so my strategy was we'll go walk on the beach. Because that way, if ever I want, I can go for a swim. It's going to be refreshing. At the same time, the sand's going to be softer, so less intense on my feet. And also, I'm like in a very small town, so there aren't that many options for walking around. So I'm like, all right, let's go walk on the beach. Now, the place opens at 6, and it's open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So my thought is, it's going to take at least 20 hours because the average walking speed for a human being is 5 kilometers per hour. Now, in the beginning, I'm probably going to be faster than that, but at the end, no way I'm faster than that. In fact, I'm probably going to be slower. So it's probably going to take most of the 24 hours to complete. So I'm like, all right, fine. They open at 6. I'll go there at 6, start my challenge at 6, keep going through the night, and then by 6 a.m. the next day, the place will be open and I can walk out. Everything's great. Of course, things didn't quite happen that way. First thing that happens is get everything ready the day before, pack a bag with like a bunch of juice because I'm like, juice is way better than water because I'm gonna need, fuel, and I know I'm not gonna be able to eat that much because I'm walking and my body's not gonna be that hungry because it's doing exercise. I'm like, juice is gonna be good, and I had like some snacks, so like granola bars and a few like some bananas and a few fruits and stuff like that. So anyway, I have this pretty heavy bag that I'm carrying. So leave the hostel, start the like tracking app because I downloaded a running app so it would be able to track all my movements and tell me how fast I'm going and all that stuff, like all those stats. So leave here at 6, carrying that heavy bag, walk there, so it's about a kilometer away. I get there, they're not open. I'm like, what? So I asked the guy, it's like, you're open from 6 to 6. And he's like, no, from 7 to 6. So either I misheard when I was there last time when he gave me the hours, or he made a mistake. Either way, I'm like, well, I can't walk around for an hour carrying this heavy bag. I asked, he wouldn't let me leave it there, so I had to walk a kilometer back to the hostel, leave the bag there, then go walk around the town for a bit, then come back, grab the bag, and then at 7 a.m., go there, buy the ticket, go in. So that's when the challenge officially began. So I walk and I find a place where I can hide my bag, and it's kind of like near the center. So as I'm walking back and forth, I can make like pit stops in the center to refuel, and I don't have to carry everything. So all I'm carrying as I'm traveling, once I drop that off, is just one bottle of juice and few snacks like granola bars and stuff like that. So start going. I'm like, all right, let's go all the way to the beach, and then come back, and then I'll keep going all the way to the other end and come back. And once I do that, like the entire beach from end to end is 10 kilometers. So go there back and forth, both ends, it's 20 kilometers total. So in my head, okay, do that 5 times, 100 kilometers, done, perfect. So that was the strategy. Of course, I start going to the first end, and there's like a bunch of small rivers that are fueling into the ocean, and there's one like that's bigger than the others. And last time I went there, I only went once to the end and back. And when I went, apparently it was the low tide because I could just cross like the entire way. The water came up to maybe like here at the highest, but I could pass just like walking. This time, apparently, the water level was a little higher, and there was a section of maybe 10, 12 kilometers where I had to swim. Now, unfortunately, I'm not that tired by then. So I've walked maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 kilometers, something like that. So I'm not that tired, but I still have to swim, fight the current that's trying to push me in the ocean, and carry the bag with like my cell phone and the juice and the food. It's like it's a good 5 pounds at least. So I had to carry that like up over my head as I'm swimming with one hand. So it's definitely not easy. It was definitely tiring. And like by the time I got to the far end, I was like, whoa, okay, that was pretty intense. I don't know if I want to keep doing that all day, especially when it's high tide in the middle of the night. Probably not a good idea. And I'm like, hey, I already passed, so let's go to the end, come back, and then I'll figure things out after. So go all the way to the end, come back. And this time I'm like, all right, last time I crossed, it was kind of difficult, so let's try going more in the ocean. There's kind of like a sandbank, so I can just walk on there. Maybe I can walk all the way across. If not, it should be a shorter distance. Plus, I'm thinking since I'm coming from the ocean, the waves are going to push me in, so I'm not going to have to fight the current. Turns out, it didn't really work out like that. So keep going to the sandbank until I can't stand anymore, so I start swimming once again with the pack over my head, swimming with one hand. Now, the dumb thing that I didn't consider is the counter current. So there's the river flowing in one way, there's the ocean flowing the other way. So one current's trying to push me one way, the other's trying to push me the other way, and I'm trying to swim. So it's like, swim that way? No, go that way. Swim that way? No, go that way. And I just keep getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And after a couple of minutes, I'm like, oh crap, this bag is really, really heavy. I only have one arm to swim. I walked 19 kilometers. I'm exhausted. I can't touch the ground. What the hell do I do? I'm like, I can't go back. I'm not even really sure where the sandbank is. It's probably best just keep going. So focusing on the shore, trying to go. Now, of course, the current's pushing me. So instead of swimming towards the shore, I'm like swimming kind of like that. I'm swimming towards the shore, but like instead of going the direct line, I'm going like the 50-kilometer line, kind of. So for every minute that passes, I grow weaker. The bag feels like it's so much heavier. And my thinking is like, oh crap, this is not good. So there is a point where I get to where I consider, fuck it, just ditch the bag, use both hands, swim to shore. Like, okay, you lose your phone, you pretty much fail the challenge because without your phone you can't track the distance, but at least you don't die. But I'm like, no, I can't give up. Keep fighting, keep trying now. So I keep trying to swim, keep the bag over the water, but it keeps getting lower and lower and closer to the water. And of course, every time there's a wave, I have to like lift up the bag higher. The wave splashes me in the face, drink water, and it's horrible. Like, I'm a very good swimmer, and never in a million years did it occur to me that I could die from drowning. But that time I'm like, yeah, okay, this could happen. And this would really suck, which is ironic because considering all the ways that I could have died, because I'm like, hey, I'll be walking in the middle of the night on a deserted beach next to a jungle with rivers. So there could be alligators, there could be jaguars, there could be snakes, there could be any kinds of animals that could decide to kill me. So from the beginning, I knew there was a chance I could die doing this. Like a slim chance, I wouldn't have done it if there was a high chance, but never once did it occur to me that I could die from drowning until that moment where I'm like, crap. So I keep trying. I do what I can do. I keep the bag as high up as I can. Keep swimming with one hand. Keep trying to look over to see the waves coming so they don't swallow me up. But I do drink a bunch of water multiple times. Comes out of my nose, my mouth. Disgusting. But I'm like, there's nothing I can do. Just like in Finding Nemo, just keep swimming. That's all I can do. So I keep swimming every couple minutes, every couple seconds. I kind of like drop my feet to see if I can touch the bottom. Panic for a second when I can't. Start swimming again. Like get hit by a wave, nearly drown. Swim a bit, try to touch the bottom, doesn't work, and repeat that for what feels like forever. In retrospect, it was probably only 5 minutes, but because I'm so exhausted, I'm so weak, and everything, it felt like ages. But eventually, put my feet down. I was like, ah, yes, I can touch the bottom. Now, even then, like waves smash into me, like I nearly like lose my balance, and by then, like there was a wave that just like smashed into me, completely soaked my bag. So I don't even know if my phone is dead. I'm like, at this point, all I care about is survival. So eventually, managed to drag my way back to shore, find like a log, sit on it, like panting, like not really throwing up the water, but spitting out the water, and pretty much emptying my nose from water and mucus and all that gross stuff. Eventually, once I kind of catch my breath and I'm like, okay, I'm still alive. I didn't die. I look in my bag and my phone's wet, but luckily the pouch in which it was mostly waterproof. So there's only a little water. It's just like I can dry it off. Everything good. So I'm like, all right, I didn't die. Phone didn't die. I can keep doing my challenge, I guess. Crap, I gotta keep doing the challenge. So after taking a little break to make sure, I recover, my heart stops racing, and I'm not in that, oh crap, I'm gonna die mode, get back up and start walking again. So I keep going until I get to the other end of the beach. Now the rivers that I cross there are way smaller, so they're easier. But still, every time I cross a river, there's like that memory of that one river where I'm like, nah, it'll be fine. Then I cross, I'm like, yeah, okay, it was good. But every single time that memory came back. So anyway, eventually make it to the end of the beach, come back to my supplies, and by then it's around kilometer 30. Yep. Kilometer 30. And now it's starting to hurt. Like, first 20 kilometers, well, actually, first 10, like, I was just, whatever, like, enjoying life, da 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 da. Second 10, nearly drowned, so that sucks. Other 10 was good, but I was starting to tire and my pace was starting to slow. And by the time I hit that 30 mark, I'm like, ah, crap. Like, my feet are definitely hurting. And ironically, like, throughout this challenge, the pain progressed and changed, but it's like, pretty much every part of my body hurt at some point. Like, there was the face from, like, sunburn. I don't know if you can tell, but I don't know if I'm really sunburned, but definitely very, very tanned. Anyway, so there's the face, the neck, and arms from the sun. And then there is the shoulders from the pack, the lower back from the pack and just from being upright and walking for all this time. And then there was the thighs. There was the, legs and calves and, all the lower legs. But the worst was, of course, the feet. So, like, there's the top of the foot, so that that section where the leg meets the foot, and as you're walking, it kind of like bends, like that joint right there, super painful. And then under my feet, in the arch of the foot, that was really painful because I didn't have that arch support. I guess that was the dumb thing about walking on the beach, but anyway, live and learn. And surprisingly, my toes. I did not expect my toes to hurt, but I guess there's a lot of pressure that goes on the toes when you're walking, especially in the sand, because it's kind of like scraping against sand and rocks and whatever's on the beach. So it got to the point where my toes were really hurting. But anyway, throughout this entire journey, like the pain is kind of like switching. It's like sometimes it's the worst pain is my lower feet, sometimes it's my toes, sometimes it's something else. It's like the pain's always there everywhere. And it's always getting progressively worse, but the worst of the pain kept like changing spots, which was interesting. But I guess it's good because it's like, okay, cool. Bottom of my feet doesn't hurt anymore. No, now it's my toes. Okay. Oh, it's not my toes anymore. Now it's my thighs. Oh, it's not my thighs, it's my butt. But anyway, I guess that kept things interesting. So anyway, finally come back at kilometer 30, and that's when it really starts hitting. That's where I get exhausted. That's where pain starts kicking in really, and I'm like, crap, I don't know if I'll be able to do this. And by then it's high tide, so I'm like, all right, instead of trying to brave the rivers and everything, I don't feel like potentially drowning again. So I found a spot on the beach of around 500 meters long that was pretty hard packed. and above the water, so I'd be able to walk there and I wouldn't have to worry too much about anything. So I pretty much just walked back and forth there for 10 kilometers. And by kilometer 40, that's when it really hit me. Like, constant pain by then, really exhausted. And that's the point where I really realized, like, no fucking way I'm going to do this. Like, I don't want to give up. I haven't given up at that point, but in my head, I'm starting to know, like, there is no way I can do this. It's starting to remind me of the running challenge I did last year where I tried to run 100 kilometers and failed and only got to 50. And I'm like, yeah, 50 is in 10. Yeah, I might just hit 50 like last time. So I'm like, all right, just get to 50. That's your goal. Get to 50. So I'm like, all right, switch things up. By then it's low tide, so I'm like, let's just go walk to the end of the beach, not crossing that river where I almost drowned the other end. So I'm like, all right, by the time I go there, come back, it's going to be another 10 kilometers. So then I'll be at 50. And that's when I can really evaluate, like, all right, how do I move forward from here? So start going, but the further I go, the more painful it becomes and the slower I get. Now, the first 20, 30 kilometers was about pace of like, all right, how fast can I go? Like, let's keep a good pace. Let's get this going. After kilometer 30, after kilometer 40, like that's completely out the window. It's at the point where I'm like, I'm just happy to be alive. I will celebrate every single kilometer that I walk, no matter how long it takes. And that worked for a while. I was like, all right, just get to the next kilometer. Eventually, it didn't become enough. I had to give myself other objectives. I'm like, all right, you can take a break when you get to the end of the beach. But then I get to the end of the beach and I'm like, I know if I stop, it's going to make things worse. So let's just keep going until I get to 45 kilometers. I'm about 44 and a half at that point. So I'm like, all right, just another half kilometer, then you can take a break. Finally hit 45, and then I'm like, okay, I need to just find a good spot to rest, like in the shade. So I keep walking until I find a good spot, but I can't find any good spots. So I'm like, all right, just keep going to that spot. And then I hit another kilometer. It's like, all right, just keep going to that spot and keep going there. It's like in my head, I'm telling myself, like, keep going to there and then you can give up. And then I get there and I'm like, all right, just get to there and then you can give up. And then I get there, it's like, all right, just get to there and you can give up. And it got to the point where I started giving myself like bribes, like in my head. By then my body started, processing the food that I consumed. It got to the point where it's like, all right, I need to poop. And I don't really feel like doing it in the woods. So I'm like, all right, your reward to get to 50 kilometers is you can go to the entrance and you can poop. That's the point I was at. So it took forever and I felt like I was going to die multiple times, but I eventually get back to my supplies. I'm like, I'm less than a kilometer away from hitting 50, so let's just keep going. So I keep going, hit 50. I'm like, yes. So at 50, I'm like, right before I get to 50, that like last kilometer or so, I was just waiting to hear my app because the app in my phone says out loud, like, oh, every kilometer. It says like you've walked 50 kilometers. This is the total amount of time you've been walking, the total speed, and the total amount of calories burned. So I'm just waiting to hear that voice, like, come on, 50, come on, 50. And every time I pass by like a patch of soft, dry sand where I could just sit, I'm like, please, 50, no. Okay, no, the next one, okay, 50, 50, no. Oh. But eventually, that sweet, blissful, automated voice sounds 50 kilometers. Now my first thought is just like, drop down. I'm like, nah, I want to have a real rest. This is going to be my first real rest since I started. I want somewhere comfortable. So I'm looking for a patch of soft, dry sand. Unfortunately, I passed all of them. So eventually I give up. I'm like, screw this, just plop down in the wet sand, lie down. And there's that moment of like total bliss. Even though lying down, I'm still exhausted, I'm still in pain. The pain goes from like a 95 to a 35, let's say. And even though a 35 is very uncomfortable, in comparison, I'm just like, oh, this is paradise. So I lie there for a while, do a few stretches, drink some juice, eat a granola bar. And the thing is, in the back of my head, I know like the longer I wait, the worse this is gonna get. because like if I wait an hour, my muscles will cool down and I'm going to be so sore. There's no way I can get up or move. And even if I choose to give up, the hostel is still 3 kilometers away. So no matter what, I need to walk another 3 kilometers. I'm like, crap. All right, so after about like 15 minutes, I get up, and even by then, my muscle had time to cool down. And the first few, like, I don't know, first 100 meters or so, I was like, I felt like an old lady. But eventually, my muscle had warmed up a bit, and I was able to go back to how I felt before hitting the 50 kilometers and taking a break. I keep going about another kilometer, finally hit my supply station, and that's the point where I'm like, all right, what now? Now by then, like I hit the 50 kilometer mark, and in my head, I'm like, I don't want to give up, but I know I'm done. Like I can't. There's no way in hell I can do the 100 kilometers. So how far can I get? How determined am I to keep going to hit a new milestone? So in my head, I'm like, last year when I did the running challenge, I ran 50 kilometers, and it was 3 kilometers from my house. So I walked 3 kilometers to get there, ran 50 kilometers, and walked 3 kilometers back, which is a total of 56. I'm like, I have to beat that. I ran 50 kilometers, now I'm walking. There's no way I can undercut that. Like, even though walking is slower and it takes way longer than running, I would just feel like a failure if I don't at least beat that. So I'm like, all right, I need to get to 57. But now I'm at 51. I'm like, 6 more kilometers feels impossible. So I'm like, all right, put your flip-flops back on because by then my feet are killing me. And maybe that's going to help. So I put them on and I go test it. So I walked another 500 meters and then back, so another kilometer. So I'm up to 52. I'm like, all right, flip-flops helped. My feet definitely feel like they're not killing me. At least, like, it's not like it's comfortable. Far from it. But at least it doesn't feel like every single step is like an explosion of pain. So that's definitely good. So I'm like, all right, I can keep going. But in the back of my head, I'm like, this place closes at 6. No way in hell I'm completing the challenge. So there's no way in hell I want to spend the night here. And there's no way I can climb over the fence given my current condition. So I need to get out of here before 6 p.m. By then, it's a little past 5. So I'm like, all right. No, it's a little before 5. Anyway, it's around 5. So I'm like, all right, just walk back to the hostel. I did the math, so it's about 3 kilometers. So I'm like, all right, by the time you get to the hostel, you'll hit kilometer 55. So I'm like, all right, grab the stuff, get going. Takes forever, but I finally make it back to the hostel. Now I'm at kilometer 55. So I'm like, all right, I already went 5 more kilometers than my last challenge, but because of those 6 kilometers that I walked there and back, I want to hit 57. So I'm like, all right, just 2 more kilometers. Now at that point, like the clouds have gotten really dark. It drizzled a bit, like maybe half an hour before, and there's thunder and lightning, and I'm like, it's gonna rain soon. I can't go back out walking in the city in my flip-flops because I've experienced what it's like walking in wet flip-flops when I crossed one of the rivers on the way back. And that's like so horrible because it's like that constant friction is like tremendous way. I don't know why I went Trump, but anyway, great way to get blisters. And I'm like, yeah, no way I'm going to survive that. So walking around the city is not an option. I could go up to my room and put socks and shoes on, but I don't know if I have the strength to do that. And if I go walking around and it starts raining and I get soaked and my shoes get soaked, like that, once again, that means guaranteed blisters. So I'm like, all right, fine. I find a spot of like grass in the hostel and just walk in circles. And that's what I do for the next 2 kilometers. Once I had 56, I'm like, yes, anything beyond this point is a new record. Hit 57, yes, officially a new record. Now I look at the time, I'm like, there's 22 minutes before I hit the 12-hour mark. So I'm like, all right, this is officially my new challenge. Forget the 100 kilometers, forget the 24 hours. My new goal is to see how many kilometers I can walk in 12 hours. So from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Just 22 more minutes. So I keep going, eventually hit 58, and I look at the time, I'm like, oh crap, there's like 6 minutes left. That means I need to keep going. I should have just taken my time because then I'd be done. So I'm like, all right, let's just keep going. So I keep going, and eventually hit 6 o'clock, stop the timer at exactly 12 hours, and the final score is 58 kilometers, .53. So 58 and a half kilometers in 12 hours. way off the 100-kilometer mark that I gave myself, way off the 24 hour mark that I gave myself, but still way more than I've ever done. Because last year when I did my running challenge, it took me 6.5 hours to run 50 kilometers. So it's nearly the double amount of time. Like, it's not as intense, but the duration that's what destroys you. That friction, that exhaustion, that nonstop, that's what completely gets in your head and just like saps every ounce of motivation that you once had. So even though technically I failed, I don't regret it whatsoever. Just like every single time I do a challenge like this and I fail. Because there's two reasons why I do this. First of all, it's because I want to be the type of person who does this. And even though I become that person the moment that I commit to doing the challenge, I know that if I don't live up, if I don't or try to complete the challenge, I'm going to revert back to who I was. So it doesn't matter if I succeed or fail. It's about committing to the challenge and going through with it and pushing myself to my very limit, whether that means succeeding or fail. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is because I recently restarted listening to the audiobook of Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, and he talks about this principle that he calls the cookie jar, where it's like, you all have a cookie jar inside of us, and that's the place where you go and reach down deep and pick up that cookie, that memory of something in the past that gives you strength, and then you eat it, and that's what gets you to keep going. So I'm like, all right, I wonder what my cookie jar is, or what my version of that is. So it's like, I want to get back to that point where I feel broken, where I feel devastated, where I want to give up more than anything. And I want to see what keeps me going. Because once you get to that point,